Uh, yes. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good evening, whatever time of the day it is for you. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Table Talk. Table Talk is a series of conversations which are about food, but not explicitly about recipes. It's not a cooking show. It's about conversations that are adjacent to food conversations that you might have, uh, chatting around a dining table, uh, or sitting in your living room with plates and discussing aspects of food. Uh, the kind of guests that we've had have ranged from, people who write about food professionally, blog about it. Uh, we the last one was we looked at archaeology and anthropology and what ancient Indians ate. We'll be looking in the future at things like Creole cultures. We'll be looking at more food history and essentially the way that food intersects with the many things, other parts of our lives. Obviously, gender, obviously, class and caste, and all of these things come in. And over time, I hope we'll be able to explore all of these. My guest this week is someone who I've known for a very long time on social media, and we have never actually met. Uh, we have seen each other's photographs and things like that, but this is actually the first kind of time we're actually talking face to face. And we've talked, I think, maybe once or twice on the phone. Uh, so your voice was not a complete strange thing to me, but seeing a moving Ranj is different for me now. Yes. So please say hello to Ranjini Devnath, who, because of her email, I've just always called her Ranj. So Ranj is a writer. I knew her from various writing forums. Uh, and she was someone who was on the other side of the world in Chicago, writing about a very different kind of life and a very different kind of atmosphere than what I was used to. Over time, in various writing groups, we've read each other's work. Over the years since then, she and her family have moved back to India. She's been writing columns, articles in the press, and has written several books, including several of them for children and a memoir about her mother's kitchen. And what we'll be talking about today is her evolution as a writer and bring it to the end towards how other people who want to write and write about food, particularly, and write about food for children and what they can take away and what Ranj can share of her experience. So, hi Ranj, and thank you for joining us on Tabletop.
Hi, Pete. That was such a lovely introduction that I almost got carried away and I was wondering if it's actually me you're talking about. But thank you for all your kind words. And it's so lovely to see a moving Peter. And yeah, it's like Peter said, we've known each other for what, 15 years, I think, online. Um,
Yep.
through Rise, I think, and then blogs and uh, Caferati and writers groups, and I don't know, we've just found each other as we moved from one social media platform to another. I think a bunch of us just kept moving, and we, always found each other and we stuck together. So that's nice. That's been nice, and it's never felt like we've never met physically. It's always been, I think we've been thick, we've been there, we've seen each other through a lot of life's ups and downs, albeit from a distance sometimes. But I think we know what's going on in the other's life, and we empathize, and we're there if the other person needs us. So that's, I think, the beautiful connection that came out of the early social media platforms, which I don't see so much now. I don't see the younger generation connecting on such a deep level the way we did. um, I might be wrong, but that's how I feel. And it's great to be here. I'm so happy to be here. I always love to chat about food and writing, two of my loves. And also to read from my books. And I just want to say that a student of mine has tuned in. So I want to say hi, Shritama. Thank you for joining in. And the other names, some of the names are familiar to me, although I can't remember where I've seen those names, but I'm sure in the same social circles that we all inhabit. So, okay, so let's dive right in and let's get started.
Sumita's here, who's been an old rise hand in Cafarati and other forums. And I have a colleague of mine from my Forbes days, Ramnath, who is also here, and Hepsi, who is a journalist, a freelance writer who worked with us at The Hindu. So,
Okay.
hi everyone, and of course, hi to everyone whose names are new to me, and I presume part of Ranja's following. Uh, yeah, the this kind of connection that we've had over social media and all of that was something that was only became, I mean, it wasn't even called social media at that time,
Mm,
and it became possible and became easier only from the late 90s in its rudimentary form. And then with, you didn't have to be a geek uh, by the time around the mid 2000s. You could just go and open a blog and put your thoughts down, and somehow or the other we found each other. We found other blogs writing about things that interested us. We put each other on our blog rolls. We were in forums like the early ones, like Rediff's forums, uh, Rise, where a huge number of us in India who are now, kind of old and doddery, but first got our first, uh, you know, dipped our toes into that sense of community where a blog was still one to many, but where it was many to many as well. And we saw that happen. And I don't know whether I would agree with you about whether the young people today don't have that. They have it, I think, in different forms. They perhaps are not as much as big fans of things like forums as we are. They run away from, I think, a Facebook and its various things primarily because their parents are there. And like, who wants to hang where their parents are, right? Uh, but I'm seeing a lot of you know, I'm sort of dabble a little bit in Instagram myself and never quite figure it out, partly because I have refused to use a smartphone. So but I've hacked my way into learning how to use Instagram
mm,
despite not having a smartphone.
mm,
And I haven't learned enough of the culture because of the way that I interact with it. But I've
mm,
seen the tumblers and the various other things pass by, and been a little mystified sometimes by the way the interaction goes, but it's always been, I think that as human beings, we look for community in different ways. And now,
yeah.
especially in this last year and a half,
Yeah.
uh, for many of us, the online community has really been all the community that we have,
Mm,
right? Because we've been cut off from so much else.
yes.
So, yes, but as you said, enough of the prologue, so to speak. And let's get straight into you and cooking and you and kitchens. And like all of us who were fortunate enough to grow up within families, it was in your mother's kitchen. Tell us about your earliest memories of food and the preparation of food.
Um, I can't think of a particular memory or even a string of memories with kitchen and food in isolation at all. And I'm sure many Indians would agree with me who grew up in, like you said, families and extended families. There was always, there were two things that were, constant in my mother's kitchen. One is the music. My mom was a Carnatic musician and she taught music. So there was always the music and then there was the food. But like I say in my memoir, the kitchen was a place for so much else. It was a hub for all manner of activities. It was um, where birthday presents would be hidden away. You could find my sister's piggy bank, up on a shelf. And there was the famous Murphy radio mounted on an ancient rosewood stand in the corner, where that was her cue to begin her day. And just the aromas and the sounds of the kitchen and the music that she so passionately brought into the kitchen. She literally sang into the pots and pans as she cooked, and somehow the food always tasted miraculously better than, if any of us tried our hands at cooking the same thing, following the same steps in the recipe. So yeah, I can't think of the kitchen as only a place where food was cooked. So there was the music, and of course there were other things that she also did in the kitchen, like knitting or embroidery, or practicing her rangoli column skills, on the floor of the kitchen. So there was so much going on in the kitchen that I think it's only in retrospect, and unfortunately only in my period of mourning her. I lost her to cancer 5 years ago, and it was only then that I revisited those memories and culled out so many important themes that were like the background music to my life, which I didn't pay so much attention to, or I wasn't so keen about absorbing when I was growing up, I guess, because I grew up in a very traditional South Indian family, but I was sent to Christian schools and colleges, so there was always this dichotomy of faith, and I mean there's just so much going on, and I grew up with a brother who was into Van Halen, and and my mom would be singing her bhajans in the kitchen. So there was a constant clash of cultures within the family, and my own understanding of everything, of spirituality, of orthodoxy, or why we cook a certain way, why we eat a certain way, why do we celebrate festivals, and why are festivals always about food. So just trying to find my own self, I was so caught up with that, I guess. But I'm glad that life pushed me into a corner and said, do this now. So I finally was able to revisit those memories and put them in this book between covers, because Peter, like earlier we both were talking before our friends came onto this call, that it's a legacy that mothers and grandmothers pass on to the next generation. And then once you're a mom, there comes a time when you've graduated from being the bearer of the legacy to the one who's going to pass it on to the next generation. But I find that that is a bit of a tightrope balance for me personally, because my kid was born in the US, and she didn't grow up knowing the traditional ways of the Indian kitchen the way I did. So in a way, it is, for me, I think that this is a gift from my mother to my daughter. So I'm just the medium, uh, to facilitate this, so to speak. Uh, for example, my daughter's idea of comfort food would be a warm bowl of pasta, or for me it would be rasam and rice. But then I have my own growing up story, which is getting married into a Bengali family and inheriting another culinary tradition. So now probably if you ask me what my comfort food is, it would be a khichdi, the Bengali khichdi, and some bhaja on the side or something. So there's just so much going on with culture and tradition, and I think one gets uh, it's fascinating also, and but also one gets too immersed in just finding oneself, I think. And that to me is actually the culmination of this whole journey, because I think cooking and writing, they're both um, solitary pursuits, you know. Uh, I, I don't like cooking when someone's watching me cook, or when someone's just standing there and passing a comment, or just exhibiting weird body language which makes you nervous. And and also so is writing, right? You want to be left alone when you're writing. So I feel like even though they're solitary pursuits, they cannot be thought of in isolation. Somehow they're both, to me, they're both very intricately connected, cooking and writing, because they're both pursuits that helped me find myself. And you know uh, yeah, so I don't know. I went off on a tangent, but
Mhm.
hopefully.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many pictures and words that, images that came into my head, and especially that, you talked about the radio, and there was instantly this memory of my mother
Yeah,
listening to music, or
yeah,
in my grandmother's kitchen as well, because I mean, you can't watch television and cook, you can't read and cook, but you could listen to music, you could listen to talk
yeah.
shows, and or largely Indian radio was very little of other than music and news. But
Hmm.
this was the soundtrack to I think so many kitchens, uh,
Yeah,
with the actual music being perhaps a bit different from place to place, depending on what
yeah.
which part of All India Radio you caught, because that was all you could catch. But I do remember there was this in Bangalore. I think this was the period when you were away. There was this World Space Radio, which again I used to hear so much of. It was just in the internet era, and suddenly people were listening to radio again. And I mean, you just post about World Space Radio right now, even on Twitter, and people will be saying like, "I still have my receiver. When will you guys ever start again?" They're not going to, but yeah. But
Yeah,
yes, so I thought perhaps this might be a good point to
yeah,
say read from your memoir,
yeah.
and, and we could then take it from there.
Yeah, sure. So, for everyone who's tuning in, my memoir is called Lessons from My Mother's Kitchen, and it's available on Amazon worldwide. But I'm also, sending out signed copies. So, if you know someone who has lost a loved one, or who would, because it's a memoir, but it's not sad. It's a happy book. Because it's got lots of happy memories of food and kitchens. And so I'm happy to send out signed copies post the lockdown in Bangalore, because the post office is closed at the moment. And I'm using the traditional uh, post office method to ship books out to people. Okay, so I would like to read a couple of things from my book. One is,
I'm just
so
turning
there are
off
a
my
couple of things.
videos. I'm just turning off my video and audio now so that folks can come focus on you. And
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
putting you in the spotlight on this one.
okay. Okay, so this is the introduction to a chapter called The Sacredness of Masalas. I'm sure everyone can relate in some way to mothers and grandmothers making fresh ground masalas at home, rather than reaching out for a store-bought version back in the day, the way we all do now. So this is called The Sacredness of Masalas. The heat doesn't dissipate as evening falls, and stepping outside the kitchen, I realize I'm wearing the fieriness of a new batch of red chilies from the stir fry I've just cooked on my fingertips, tongue, hair, and clothes. This takes me back in time to Amma's large kitchen, where we typically settle down for light meals in the summer. Hot rice into which a dollop of golden ghee would have melted like a gurgling stream, a tangy tomato rasam, a no frills gourd palya with curly curry leaves bearing a secret mildew of hing from the seasoning, a freshly pickled baby mango, and a glass of buttermilk, replete with its pools of cream. In a corner, where the grinding stone dipped into the ground, you'd see her working the heavy duty iron staff in deft strokes, and the chilly flakes would rise into the air around her like dust in a battlefield weighed down by countless hooves. We'd sit there stunned long after our plates had dried up and work up a real cough, with our breaths virtually on fire, because it would be insolent to turn our backs on an act so sacred. So, this is one of my favorite bits from the book. And just talking about the clash of cultures, I would like to read a poem. Um, So I have a kitchen poetry section at the end of my memoir where I have a bunch of poems, and all of these poems feature my mother in some form or the other. So one of these poems is called The Women I Am. The years have a funny way of making different women out of you. I am now my mother, for instance. In my calloused hands and cracked feet, I see snatches of her. My kitchen smells like hers, all asafoetida and cardamom, burnt milk and curdled ghee. My voice raises new questions, stuck somewhere between her hindola and my bure, calling out to my child, reminding my husband of tasks consigned to oblivion. In all these and more, in a kitchen napkin folded in rectangular precision, a ball of yarn rolled up in linty confusion, a recipe scrawled on sepia tinted paper in the spice tray, the slovenly bag that bears all the answers to life's exigent needs, the little rock upon which time has etched Ganesha's face, safely hidden from external forces in my silver trinket box. I see my sister, my mother, and her mother, perhaps, as I become them and life becomes me. So, yeah, so this is uh, one of those poems that uh, sort of tells you what the cultural clash was that I was referring to earlier about her Carnatic music and my, uh, you know, interest in Western music and just, but the inheritance of the aromas and the spices and the, you know, culinary tradition has seen us through these clashes and has remained intact for what it's worth. Yeah.
It just brought to mind also a poem I was trying to recall, but it was about I am becoming my mother, uh,
Yeah.
which I saw in a collection for the first time. It was called Poems on the Underground.
I see.
Um, and that is so much, I mean, in so many ways, as we grow, I don't have kids, but you do, and I've seen this happen with other people as well. You
Mm.
see, sometimes you hear your parents through your suddenly speaking through your mouth, and you're like, wait, what just happened? Uh,
Yeah.
with the transmission of culture through food, of memory, of history, of family, of values.
Yeah.
This is something that is really a thing that people who don't think of food deeply perhaps don't get. But the whole
Mm.
preparation of food. And I know you said at one point earlier that we talked, that you don't like cooking with other people. But
Yeah.
there was also community in cooking and people
Yes.
cooking together and the larger families and the joint families,
Yes.
uh, where the women would get together, and in a sense that was their set of bonding. And one of the conversations behind the scenes on the Simple Recipes group at a time when several men came on and made
Mm.
very boy jokes,
Yeah.
you know, locker room
Yeah.
stuff. And I was discussing this with a friend, and I was like, it's not that these are people who are unused to men forgetting that this is not the locker room. But, and she said, no, what you got to understand is that for many people, for many women,
Mm.
women don't have the locker room. They have
Mm.
kitchen, and they
Yeah.
see that kitchen as their space,
Yeah.
and do not, and therefore are far more likely to look askance at someone who comes in and doesn't acknowledge that this
Yeah.
is that space, which of course is a gendered way of looking at the kitchen, and but a fact in that across cultures, it
Yeah.
has been women who have shouldered the most of the burden, the role, the responsibility, however you want to put it, of putting that food on the table, preparing
Yeah.
that food.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter, men will get, brownie points for cooking as well as doing something else. For women, it's like just kind of expected. But
Yeah.
yes, speaking of different cultures and whatnot, yeah. So you went, so to speak, directly, not just from your mother's kitchen
Mm.
to your own as a married woman, but to a kitchen on the other side of the world. You got
Yeah.
married, and a couple of weeks later, you were in the USA.
Yeah.
And what, so like, from little Ranj to Ranj grown up and, that bit, can you take us a little bit through that and that transition, that movement to uh, suddenly finding yourself in a, no matter how much you know and read about it, actually living in a very different kind of space
Yeah.
and a different kind of kitchen with not necessarily, I mean, the Indian stores were not as
Yeah.
easily accessible as they are perhaps to some, to Indians who now have moved to America in the more recent past. Uh, what was all that like? I mean, growing up and then the move.
Yeah. So even though I have all these memories and that I write, I've written so much about all these memories with my spending time with my mom in the kitchen and literally learning things, just being at her elbow, even though I wasn't a functional part of the cooking, the everyday cooking. Um, so I mean, I had a fair sense of, for example, spice pairings, or just by observing what spice goes well with what, or I had a basic instinct, I think, that had developed over a period of time, but I had never actually set foot in a kitchen and managed a kitchen all on my own before I got married. So I think it was just the week before I got married that it suddenly hit me that I was going to be away, and I would have had to cook and fend for myself. So I sat down and I took some recipes down from my mother, I remember. And I remember getting confused with the names of ingredients. Some things were said in the vernacular, which is Kannada, and then while translating it into English, there were so many ingredients that I didn't really know. So I remember a couple of things which were some of the ingredients were misplaced in the recipes, and I had to figure all that out. But when I went, after I got married and I went to the US, the thing that hit me the most was that there was no sense of community, or even in the kitchen, like you said, my mom was always uh, not assisted, but we had a lot of people around. Somehow there were aunts and there were neighbors trickling in and out of the house. And um, I write about this also, that the women, I learned a lot from about friendships from my mom, and the way she conducted herself among her friends, who were mostly neighbors or people she met at a cookery club, or these were the uh, you know uh, I think social arenas for them to make friendships, to forge friendships. And they had a book club and they used to read, I remember. And then there was a cookery club. And so I missed that. I suddenly found myself alone in this kitchen. And also, I didn't grow up, I grew up in a traditional South Indian household. So we didn't have an oven. uh, you know my mom used to bake a few things, but she they fashioned, my aunt and her, they fashioned a makeshift oven. So you used to get these dalda dabbas, those tin boxes. It's doing the rounds on Twitter, by the way. I just saw it yesterday on Twitter that someone's posted this picture of an ad where a woman is in the kitchen in the 70s with, you know, frying puris with dalda, and there's a big dalda dabba on the counter. So my mom, uh, I don't vividly remember us using dalda. I don't know. But the neighbors maybe used dalda or whatever. And she hauled all these tin boxes, the dabbas, and she took them to an ironsmith. around the house and had had him open these dabbas out inside out and then fashion them into tin trays, to bake cookies in. So they would make a bed of sand and they would have coal underneath that, and they would fire up the coal, and then the coal would heat the bed of sand, and then they would place doughy blobs on this tin tray, which was crafted out of a refurbished dalda dabbas. So I remember all these things, and whereas in the West, I went. The first thing that excited me was the sight of this huge oven in the kitchen, and that's where my journey, my tryst with baking started. And yeah, so I didn't know too much, but it was good to have shortcuts. Like I think within the first week of me being there, my husband just decided to invite his colleagues over for dinner, and I didn't know what I was going to cook. And they sent me the menu themselves. They said they would like to have puri and chole, uh, and this was the morning off, and I went to the grocery store and I found uh, you know um, the garbanzo beans, the what do you call them, pragyas here. I don't remember what you call them. I think they're called garbanzo. So uh, this was a miracle. It was boiled chana, which was in a tin. So all I had to do was drain the liquid out and then make the masala and you know bung a few tomatoes and whatever in, and it would be ready. And of course, I burnt puris and I set the fire alarm off, and so it was hard. It was very hard initially, and but it also was fun in a way because like I said earlier, um, it became a solitary pursuit. So that's where that comes from, because everything about the West, or the biggest lessons that the West has taught me, one of the biggest lessons rather, is self-sustenance. you know and self-containment, and just being alone. Uh, it does something to you. It stirs something very deep inside you, and it makes you find yourself in a strange way, I think. So cooking was that pursuit for me, which was a solitary pursuit for several years in the West, because my husband would go off to work, and I was uh, without a job initially, and of course I decided to study and all of that. So a lot of other things were happening, but for the most part, during the day at least, it was a solitary pursuit. And then all these things came back to me, that how did my mom do it? She used there was the radio, so then I would listen to music, or I would sing and cook. And I think it was a part of self discovery. So that's where that comes from, I think. And also, then slowly realizing that my husband's tastes, even though we knew each other before, but when you start living together, it's a whole other ball game. Like everybody must know. So just realizing that what's comfort food for me isn't the same for him, and just realizing all these little things. So and then learning to embrace a new culinary identity, and trying to cook some of his favorite foods from his cuisine. And uh, the reverse was also true, to be fair. He learned how to make akki roti and bisibele bhat for me, and rasam. And so there was this constant, I think, um, this journey was constantly exciting, and also taxing in some ways, because there were failures and there were moments of despair when you're all alone and you don't know. It's snowing outside, you can't step out of the house. You can't go and meet a friend for coffee, or there's no dashini coffee. And just so many little things. And yeah, so I think it was a way to discover myself, frankly. And also um, the idea that I don't want to be uh, you know pigeonholed, or There was a time when, why should we cook all the time? We'll just take out, or we'll just grappling with all these things. So it was, it, in retrospect, it was fun. But back then, I think there were many times when I wanted to hang up my boots and give up. And, I was breaking things, I was burning things constantly. And also, this journey is, like I said, you can't think of food or cooking as an in isolation, because it comes with nutrition, it comes with your own memories that inform your culinary practices, right? And your own ways of looking at food and how you want to. I think even generally the choices that you make in life are mirrored in all of this, and how you choose to nourish yourself, how you choose to nourish your body. I mean, are you okay? uh, at some point, when I was newly married, maybe in my late 20s, it was okay to eat leftovers, but I wouldn't do that today. I would prefer to eat a fresh cooked meal. I would prefer to eat smaller portions. I would prefer to grow some of the herbs or whatever myself. I would prefer to buy from a local farmer. Back then, all of this didn't matter, because the information came much later, or you read books, and one watched shows, and it takes time to find your feet through all of this. And that's why I keep saying that I can never think of cooking as an art or a science in isolation, because it's so much of everything else. It's your life story in a way. you know my entire life story is in this book, uh, in a way. So yeah, so it's stories, it's culture, it's the choices that you make. It's the music. For me, it's always been the music. So the music is always an inherent part of this. And I also write about this exclusively. So there are specific ragas that um, were sung in the morning, for example, and how they informed the choices of breakfasts, for example. If this raga was playing, then one knew that this was the breakfast that was going to come out of the kitchen. So many little nuances to this whole thing. So I could never think of cooking as something that it's a skill that you master. I think you keep learning. Every day is a learning, and it tells you so much about yourself. It tells you, and to be honest, also as a writer, I'm a or rather as a person, I'm socially awkward. I don't know if that shows. I don't think too many people know it. Maybe only the ones in my closest circles know it. I'm socially awkward. So uh, I think cooking and writing have both brought me out of the shy closet, you know. So, and also there's a crazy example. I don't know whether it simplifies this or complicates it, but it's something to do with how Asians are so good with stringed instruments. It's a thing. So Asians are very good with stringed instruments. This I know, and I know my friend Pragya knows this, and we've, I think, talked about it. um, my daughter started to learn to play the violin when she was all of three and a half. So, and all the music schools that we went to in Chicago were run by Asians. And so this knowledge comes from there, and also comes from reading and all of that. So Asians are very good with stringed instruments. Um, and the reason that that is so is because, the notations and the cycles of the music are mirrored in their uh, linguistic intricacies, their tonal, what do you call them? Their tonality. I think when they speak, they have different tonalities for it. Could be the same alphabet, but the tonality sort of, changes,
Your ability to
alters
hear.
the.
Hmm. So when we talk about Asians here, we are talking about what America calls Asians, which
Yes,
is East Asians.
East occasions. Yes.
right?
Yes.
So yes, and a lot of the thing there in languages like Mandarin, for instance, the same set of syllables would
Yeah.
have two different meanings depending on pitch and
Yes.
tone,
Yes.
and your ear for music
Yeah.
and the ability to
Trans-
perfect pitch is far more likely to happen in, say, a Mandarin speaker than it is with an English speaker.
yeah. True. And it's also why the five black notes on the piano cannot contain all the sonic resources that exist in Asian music, in East Asian music.
Mhm.
Yeah. And also the collaborative efforts of, uh, I mean, it didn't take just musicians. So it took musicians and astrologers, they say, to bring the music of the empire in tune with the outer universe. So it takes both symphony and dissonance to make music, so to speak. So for me, uh, what I'm drawing out of all of this is that cooking and writing are, in a similar weird marriage for me, the way East Asians, their language and their music are connected. For me, my cooking and writing is like this. Um, so I feel like, your identity, cooking is speaks of your identity, doesn't it? Uh, I think by instinct we go when we are thrown into the kitchen for what depending on what the circumstances are. The instinct would be to think of what did my grandmother do, or what did my dad do, or what did my mom do. What did I eat growing up? I think these are the questions that naturally just come to you when you go to the kitchen. So there's that, and then there's your mood. What do you feel like eating today, or the memories that you so much of food is nostalgia. Oh, remember jab hum chote the, all these paperboat ads, paperboat and the drink. So much of that is our life. Those train journeys and eating the khatta aam with and the guavas with the chili powder and the salt. So much of that is us. I think it's a shared uh, meaning, right? So much of cooking is like that. And so is writing. Your own life experience informs your writing, no matter what you're writing, whether it's fiction, non-fiction, doesn't matter. So it's all your own personal experience, your own personal views or perspectives that flow into your writing. So that's how, for me, both food, cooking and writing are intricately sort of, I mean, they go almost hand in hand. So I would rather only write about food and nothing else.
That I was actually going just about to ask you that about do you see yourself primarily as a writer about food,
Yeah.
and which you said that is the way that you look at it now. So perhaps we can take a little time right now to look at your evolution as a writer as well.
Yeah.
Young woman who uh, finds herself in this strange place, decides at that point that she's going to study. Uh, where did where did writer Ranj start? When did you want to start writing, and how did you go about creating your writing practice, building it up to the point that you can now point to this chunk of books and say, I wrote these. This is my little bit so far, and I am a writer now. So when did you give yourself permission to call yourself a writer? And how did you grow yourself as a writer?
I've always thought of myself as a writer. I used to write poetry when I was like so many others that I've met. We used to write poetry when we were in college. It was an outlet to, dealing with all those hormonal imbalances, I think. And I didn't really take that seriously back then. But yeah, but my career has always been in writing, even though I was a science student. And recently someone was talking about this on Twitter, and they said, these days kids get a smartphone when they finish their 10th grade exams. What did you get? So I said that I got a good talking to, that I would excel in science and that I should stick with science. And I did, much to my own dismay. I excelled in science, but I studied environmental science in my undergrad. But I wanted to be a writer. So I got into advertising. I did copy for a few years. And then I think the big internet boom was happening. So a lot of web content, there was this shift from advertising, copywriting to writing content for the web. So uh, I worked as a web content writer. And then I got a chance to go to New Zealand and study creative writing. So I took that chance and I went there, uh, and it was right around that time that I'd met my then would be husband. So then the wedding happened, a few years after that, couple of years after that, and then went off to the US. But I was freelancing before I left also. Just before I left, I started writing for the Hindu in Bangalore. And um, so when I went, I continued to write for the Hindu. But how it actually took off is, I think, on Rise, when we were on Rise, and I just had the baby. My daughter was, I think, 6 months old, or no, 3 months old maybe. And I'd written something about my experience as a new mom, and our dear common friend Madhavan read it, and he said, why don't you, I want you to run this column for me. So he was handling the Indian Express North American edition, which was getting published out of New York, but he was manning it from the Delhi desk. Strange, strange job profile. But I think he'd just come out of Reuters and he had this job. And so he gave me this chance to be a columnist. So I started a column for the Indian Express North American edition called Chicago Blues, where I mostly wrote about my own experiences as an immigrant in the US. And invariably, food and culture and all of these things would creep into my columns, and it became a pattern. And after a while, he noticed it. And that was also the time, I think, that Facebook had just started and a bunch of us had gotten onto Facebook. And I vividly remember I was baking cranberry orange scones. And it was the first week on Facebook or something. And I'd written about how my kitchen and my house was smelling, and something to do with cranberry orange scones. And Madhavan read it and he said, that's it, there's no need to pretend anymore. You just should do food writing exclusively, so even in the column, we should just do food. And so I think he planted this seed, and sort of that's how it, all started, the food writing. And then, yeah, I think being in Chicago at that time was a good time. So I had a lot of opportunities. I attended a food writing workshop by Andrew Smith, a food historian, and I met a bunch of great people at the Culinary Historians of Chicago. And, I ended up hosting a lecture for them at Kendall College in Chicago about busting myths about Indian food. So just became something, I mean, it just grew into something like a big passion for me. Uh, I think it found me. Food writing found me, so to speak. So that's how it started. And then there was the food blog, Tadka Pasta. Then my friend joined me, Ruchira, and um, then the book was born, the first book, which is Around the World with the Tadka Girls. So that's pretty much how it started. Yeah.
So if you had advice to offer to someone starting out now and thinking that, I want to write about food,
Yeah.
what would that be?
I think food writing, unfortunately, has been relegated to nostalgic trips, or, And also long form is suffering because people now write on Twitter, people write on Instagram, and they write short paragraphs or short notes accompanying their food photographs. So I think food writing should not just be informed by uh, what the trend is today or by hashtags, but it should be informed by doing a deep dive into what you are, what you eat, how you nourish yourself, how you uh, you know the ingredients that you choose, your habits, your life habits. So it should be informed by all of this, and also doing a deep dive into, for example, um, nutrition, and just saying that I'm doing a green smoothie week because it's healthy is not enough. Go do a deep dive into why greens are good for you, and why and often I see people just writing things like, it's raining, so we're making pakoras, and it reminds me of my grandmother's pakoras. And I mean, that's not food writing. I think food writing has to be informed by history. Food writing has to come from a place of honesty, and also everyday food is not pretty in an Indian kitchen. It's not always good looking food. So there's this hype that food writers feel like they have to live up to in order to, look a certain way on social media. But that's not what it is. And which is why I feel like I cannot pinpoint a single Indian food writer and say, wow, I admire their work. All the names that come to me are Western authors. And uh, so I think, yeah, and also not being afraid of using your heritage, whether it's language, or allowing that to become a part of your food writing. We tend to anglicize quite a bit, and it's a bit of a put off, frankly. you know if you want to say tair sadam, by all means, don't say yogurt rice, or just because you know I mean, I don't think it's so much about the audience. Food writing is a personal, it's very personal. So I think, yeah, it has to come from a place of honesty, from a place of being well informed, and also like the group, what your group stands for, um, simple recipes, keeping things simple and keeping things honest, and uh, also giving back to the local community, finding ways to connect with farmers, finding ways to connect with people who grow the food, and learning about food ways, the rituals and practices that happen on the farm, and how they translate to what comes onto your table. So I think food writing has to encompass all of this, and it shouldn't just be a unidimensional account of what you cooked today. Or that would be my advice, to delve deeper into ingredients, into practices, into the people who make the food happen.
I thought we'd actually moved beyond that era of describing things as savory pancakes and rice cakes and lentil soup. But do you still see a lot of that happening? People writing.
Oh yeah, I do. It's rampant on Instagram. You're
Sorry?
missing out. You're missing out.
Yeah. It just started to rain very heavily here, which is why I was having a little difficulty hearing. But yeah, the as a the parts of the different cultures that affected your way of looking at food, your own, your birth family's Kannada roots,
Yeah.
Kannadiga roots, your husband's family's Bengali, influences from there. You bringing these together in a kitchen in America, in an America that had not yet been was not yet as welcoming and as and didn't give Indians as much of home as they would do now.
Yeah.
Uh, how about your writing? Has your writing also come with these multiple influences? What are your influences as a writer? You mentioned that you don't like, there's not many, that there aren't any Indian food writers who you admire. Who are the ones you admire? Who are the ones who are not maybe role models, but also just people you admire as writers on food?
So the biggest influence has been Leah Eskin, who used to run a column called Home on the Range in the Chicago Tribune, and it's something that I looked earnestly forward to reading every Sunday. It was a ritual. I used to sit with my cup of tea, and I didn't want to be disturbed when I'm reading this column. And because it was so beautiful, it was so evocative. There was so much imagery, and there was also very different approach to food writing that I'd never quite seen before. Of course, I'd read Indian American authors writing about Indian food. For example, Amulya Maladi. I'd read her book called The Mango Season, in which the descriptions of the pickling process as a community activity was so beautifully described that I kept going back to those pages long after I'd finished the book. And there were authors like this, like Amulya Maladi, and I think Bharti Kirchner was another one that I'd read. But Leah Eskin brought a brand new perspective because she didn't shy away from personifying ingredients or using, uh, you know, uh, local names for ingredients when describing, ethnic cuisines. And there's so much of this, I think, in Indians about I mean, we'd rather say turmeric latte than say haldi doodh while conversing with a Westerner. I think there's so much of this, I don't know, inherent shame or something that we carry around, which is unhealthy, which trickles down in the writing that I see, in all the writing that I see. So that was refreshing for me. And also, I think I made a note of this somewhere. So I'm scrolling and seeing what I wrote about Leah Eskin, because she was a big influence, you know. Uh, so yeah, so um, she had this very a gentle way in which she used to nudge ingredients to rise to the occasion, or she, berated ingredients for not behaving well, or and she made ingredients sound almost human, as if they had flaws and they were like any of us, that the yeast didn't activate today. And also she had a sense of defiance about her ways in the kitchen, which is, for example, uh, why should we only heat the butter and use it hot in brownies? Why can't we do that with cookies, for example? Or why should we always add chocolate chips from a bag into a chocolate chip cookie dough? Why can't we just take a slab of chocolate and hammer it into shards? And just these rustic, real ways of being in the kitchen. And it just came from a place of so much honesty that I felt like I knew her through her writing. And that was what was so mesmerizing for me. And she's been the biggest influence. And I've been in touch with her also, which um, so thanks to social media. So I've written fan letters to her, and she's written back, and I'm on her mailing list. And um, you know so it's been quite a journey knowing this woman and trying to emulate or imbibe some of the qualities that she had, especially her way around the kitchen. Wasn't so much about the recipe, but it was just how she described how she arrived at the recipe, or how she you know described things, or how she constantly questioned things, that um, and how she brought the whole home and the family and home and hearth into the uh, kitchen. Like there's this book called The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake. So it reminds me of Leah Skin for some strange reason, because she wrote about things like, why is my dog morose today, and maybe I should uh, do something. I should bake something for him. I should cook something specially for him. And so the her kitchen activities were never in isolation or far removed from the goings on in the household. So her husband, her children, her dog, her cat, they were all an integral part of the cooking process. And that's what I liked, that it was so real, and there was no big effort to conceal all the dirty parts of what a family is made of. So yeah, I think that's been my biggest influence, Leah Eskin. And there've been several other authors that I've admired. Ruth Rachel is one of them. um, so many more.
Could we perhaps hear a little bit more of your readings from your books?
Yeah, sure.
So
So I
after that,
think,
I'd like to spend a little time after this on writing specifically for children. And
yeah,
I'm very mindful of the fact that I did promise people that I would let
yeah,
them get in to ask questions as well. So I want to make sure there's enough time for that.
yeah,
So if you could perhaps take a couple of things that you would want to read right now. We'll
yeah,
talk a little bit about writing for children, and then we're just going to throw it open to everyone who has stayed with us up to now.
okay, sure.
Folks, everybody who's listening, while Ranj is opening up to the right page, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Or if you'd like to come on camera, do the Zoom raise hands thing, and I will invite you to join in on the conversation with audio and video if you are comfortable with that. There is no pressure to turn on video and audio. You could, if you want, just put questions into chat, whatever you're comfortable with. But for now, let's just listen to Ran's reading. Again, I'm going to turn off my camera and my audio so that
Okay, so this is a chapter from my book Around the World with the Tadka Girls. The chapter is called Make Mine a Masala Mary. So, spending summer holiday afternoons scrambling for cashew fruits and guavas with a bunch of equally competent friends in the neighbor's garden back at home was the highlight of my growing up years. After the precious finds were pocketed, we'd be off on some new quest or the other, like discovering the multipurpose uses of fresh bark gum and the medicinal properties of eucalyptus from the grove that led to the officer's canteen. When hunger pangs struck, and they did for no rhyme or reason, at any given hour of day, we'd implore our moms for money to buy pepper budgies from the canteen and a bottle of Thumbs Up to wash them down with. But when all else failed and it was too sultry to be allowed to go outside on an adventure, we simply ended up indoors with our Archie comics, snakes and ladder games, and homemade eats and coolers. There would be cold sandwiches or fruit charts to chomp on, endless bowls of potato chips or crackjack biscuits, often within an arm's reach, and alternating with Rasna mango, a zippy tomato drink that was so perfectly proportioned with sweet and tart flavors that it was fought over to the last drop. This Masala Mary is an ode to that memory of yore and is a ripper of a red mocktail brimming with healthful lycopene. Should you forego the carbonated and tanned juice varieties for this merry mocktail, your guests will be raving about it long after they take your leave. So, this is an introduction to this drink, which is essentially a tomato juice, which you can also turn into a cocktail by, adding vodka into it if you're so inclined. But it's a great drink, and I've served it as part of a Mexican Tex-Mex uh, meal because it's tomato, and somehow it's got a Spanish uh, undertone. So yeah, so this is that's what this is about.
have you got something else that you'd like to read?
uh, I was just being mindful of the time. I'm always happy to read, but I'm not sure.
We have time. We're at about 10:15 India time right now, and we
Okay.
have conservatively 45 minutes. So that's enough time for everyone to chat as well as to hear a little bit more uh, of what you have to read.
Okay, so the very next chapter then is warming up to refreshing Riesling. So and this book is around the world with the Tarka girl. So it's essentially a record of travels from around the world and how traveling to different parts of the world have sort of informed the recipes in the book. Um, like the silky curves of waves on Lake Michigan on a crisp autumn day, just before it gets all iced up. The bubbling wines at wayside wineries in scenic little towns are a treat to the senses. It's hard to turn down an offer to sample gourmet Pinot Noirs and Rieslings, fruity combinations in the season's most popular dessert wines, and the sylvan scent of cinnamon in the mulled wines. On a road trip to Brown County in Indiana during Thanksgiving a few years ago, we managed to take in a couple of family owned wineries for some sampling and came out feeling recharged, filled with the desire to take a shot at whisking up our own cocktails, even if gingerly. The white, peppery intensity slung around the plum and cherry ridden core of the petite Syrah would, we inferred, not only pair well with our hara bhara tofu tikka, but would taste great even when infused with hints of clove and a light dusting of paprika. The peachy apricoty essence of the Vidal Blanc ice could take in a smack of mango and the tang of lemon, we figured, as well as some mint maybe to complement a warm dessert like our berry crumble, which is up on page 112. Heady with ideas and the piquant aftertaste of a horseradish dip we had dunked some chips into between dainty sips of a few other varieties of wines, we couldn't help but hum the wine safari riff from the movie Sideways as our hybrid car hit the road again. Awestruck by the genius of Rolf Kent and by whatever little we'd gleaned during our visit, we primed up a classic Riesling to serve warm at our Christmas party for close friends. So this is a desi version of a cocktail using an American wine. So that's what this is.
So let's talk. I mean, finally, because that was the alibi for this conversation uh, about writing for kids. The Around the World book was a collaboration, and the books you've written for children have also been in collaboration with Ruchira, right?
Yes,
Uh,
yeah.
so writing and cooking are solo things for Ranj. Why did you do a collaboration? One, and could we then talk about what goes into writing for children about food? There is a question from someone in the audience, from Rana Khan, who puts this nicely. What is the most important factor when writing cookbooks for children and young readers? Is it easy recipes with simple ingredients, nutritional value, interesting or fun presentation, visual appeal, or emphasis on snack foods rather than meats? So, keeping that in mind, one, why does the soloist work in collaboration? And two, uh, how does one write food for kids? What can you tell us about that? What can we learn from you on this?
Okay, so why the collaboration? I think sometimes there's no single answer to a question like that. I don't know why. It's something that you do, as dictated by a moment, in the past. And Ruchira and I were friends uh, through food. We first met at a community potluck. we lived in the same community in Chicago, and of course, then she has a girl, and I have a girl, and these two were they ended up being buddies as well. So just a friendship that grew out of love for food, love for baking. So we after that first meeting at the potluck, we hit it off. We were a part of a book club. We started a book club in the community. So we read food fiction exclusively. And, then we had more potlucks and more avenues to cook for each other. And, we went to baking workshops together. So we did a whole, series of food related activities together. We would go to the farmers markets, and discuss what to cook. And then every year, both our girls have birthdays in April, and they're not too many years apart. They're 2 years apart. So her daughter's birthday, my daughter's birthday, would constantly be discussing party ideas and food, finger food themed parties, and all of these things. So it was just something that happened, I think, in that one moment, a moment's calling. So I asked her if she would be interested in doing a food blog with me, and she said yes. And we haven't looked back since. Of course, we've both grown through this journey of blogging together, because it's after all, two creative personalities coming together. And she's Ruchira's um, her background is different. She's a Punjabi married to a Tamilian. So she grew up baking a lot. Her mom used to bake a lot, and I didn't have that growing up. And so there's a lot of gaps that we fill for each other also. But Ruchira's been really good with aesthetics and presentation and food styling, and ideas for recipes. And so I think it's uh, the two creative forces coming together. But I come from the writerly sort of side, and she comes from the aesthetic styling uh, side. So that's how we came together. And writing about food for kids, again, an idea that came out of a casual phone conversation. Because the first book that we actually wrote that got published was this book called Mango Masala: 60 Indian recipes from your local supermarket. So obviously, as it's self-explanatory, the title, it was meant for the American market, because you go to a supermarket, buy supermarket ingredients, and you can have Indian food. That was the idea. And then came Around the World with the Tatka Girls. And then there was a gap of a year or a year and a half. And one day we were on the phone casually talking about what we were up to, and what books we were each reading, and what books the children were reading, because so much of this constant talk about books. And also, when we used to discuss birthday party ideas, they were all themed parties, and all these ideas came from books, but we didn't realize it back then. Like a Princess Victoria party. So there's a series of books on Princess Victoria, and Winnie the Pooh, and everything came from books, but we never sat down and strategized. Just something that happened. And so when we were talking one day, we said, so what are the girls reading or whatever? And then we said, oh my God, we should do a book for kids, because there's so much of food and books that are part of our conversations. And now that we've written two books for adults, maybe it's time to try writing something for kids, because in a way it also mirrors what happens at home with our kids. It's reflective of that also, in a way, because there are sous chefs, and they help us in the kitchen. And we've always had them at our elbow, and tearing up lettuce for a salad, or mashing potatoes for mashed potatoes, or just little things. So we said, since they both love books and they both love food, we should definitely do a book for kids. So it was just this spark of an idea that came from a casual conversation. And that's the basis of Bookworms and Jelly Bellies, because it's a book about books for children which have to do with food. For example, the famous Five Enid Blyton books have inspired a recipe for cranberry scones in the book. So there's a little bit of a note description of what the book is, the series is about. And then, of course, we had to categorize these recipes. So to answer his question about should it be about simple recipes? Yeah, it should, because at the end of the day, we're looking at this as a life skill, because we know we have kids, we're parents, and we know that it's a life skill. Um, so that's the basis of it, that you don't just want children to be peripherally associated with food. You want them to come to the kitchen, and you want them to help you in the kitchen, and you want them to be able to fend for themselves. And also, you want them to know what they're putting in their bodies. You want them to be aware of nutrition, and things like that, and locally grown produce, and food miles, and little things that you can teach them from a young age will go a long way. And it also, again, comes from this place for me personally, that my kid, when we moved back to India, education was a big ticket item. So we did the typical NRI thing, and we put her in an international school, and everything. But the first 6 months into this school, we realized that this blackboard culture, so to speak, is not for us. So we did away with mainstream education. So she went to an alternate school. She went to the Waldorf Steiner School, and it's an experiential schooling method, which came about in the wake of the Second World War. That's a story for another day. But Rudolf Steiner set up this education system in the wake of the Second World War, when kids had seen so much trauma, and he wanted education to be therapeutic. So they call it the 3H system of schooling, which is education for the head, heart, and hands. So these kids in the Waldorf schools, we have Waldorf schools all around the world, and locally, I think the schools sort of, acclimatize to the local culture, and they, bring in bits of the local culture into their system. But primarily, it's the 3H. So it's, of course, there's books, and there's no textbooks, there's no rote learning. So there's no prescribed textbooks, but there are a set of skills that you want the kid to acquire at the end of an academic year. So I think grade 4, for example, is all about Norse mythology, and grade 5 is Greek, and so on and so forth. And so another big thing, and education for the heart, which is empathy and sharing, and doing things for others around you, and what can you offer the universe? That's the question that they need to answer at the end of the schooling years. And education for the hands, which is handwork, crafting, and art, and uh, growing food, so growing vegetables, and composting, and gardening. And so there was so much of all this going on in the background that it was a natural transition to make books for kids about healthy eating, making conscious healthy choices, especially when it comes to snacking. um, and yeah, and also, like I said, I've said this a few times today, that your personal choices in general in life should inform your cooking, and so it should be for children as well. you know how are you feeling today, and what's your mood, and do you see that do you have a stomach ache, or do you just learning to listen to your body, teaching them that. And I think it comes from all of these influences, and all of these immediate realities that we both were in, for our kids, and that's what translates into the books. So that's how Bookworms and Jelly Bellies happened. And now the latest book is called History Dishtory. So this is a roller coaster ride. So it's also been a big growth, a learning curve for both of us. So this book is it's children's fiction. So, but it's a deep dive into 15 historical events from around the world. So this book answers questions like, what was the first meal on the moon? What was the last meal on the Titanic before it sank? And was the stuffed turkey really a part of the first Thanksgiving meal? And was salt such a big deal that our freedom fighters had to march for it in 1930, the Dandi March? So, in this book, since it's fiction, it's a very curious book in that sense. It's not a recipe book, but it also has recipes. So it's when we say cookery books or cookbooks for children, people are only thinking in terms of, oh, you have a bunch of recipes for kids. It's not just that. It's teaching them about world history, so there's a pair of twins in this book, and they are playing a game on a cutting edge app. And this game, it has augmented reality, it has VR and all of that, and it throws them into back in time, into all these different historical moments, 15 historical moments to be precise. And they have challenges at every stage that they need to overcome in order to, win this quiz and win this event over, So for example, they get thrown into the trenches of the First World War, and they figure out how soldiers survived on mere scraps and cuttings of things. And they go into hiding in Anne Frank's house and figure out, that they had, rations, limited supplies of ingredients, and how did they survive? What did they cook? So there are recipes which are inspired by the historical events. So they're not authentic recipes. For example, there is something called the gur cake, which came off of the Irish Easter Rising. So they go back in time to the riots during the Irish Easter Rising. And there was something called gur cake, which bakeries produced with scraps and cuttings of stale bread and stale cake, which, they
Could you
would.
spell that, please?
Hmm? It's
Could you spell
GUR,
that?
but it's pronounced gur.
Okay.
So these guriers were boys who couldn't afford to go and buy things and eat in bakeries. So they ran around after school with with bags, and they picked out stuff that the bakeries threw at the back, cuttings and edges, corners of bread pieces, and chunks of stale
Mm.
cake and things like that. And so the grilled cake is a recipe that came from that chapter. So I mean, there's history in it, in the recipe as well, but these are refurbished, made over recipes, which kids can actually go and cook on their own. So they're getting to learn a life skill, they're getting to learn about world history, they have an adventurous story, uh, you know, and they get to eat delicious food, which is also healthy, which uses healthy ingredients. So I personally think this is a book that I'm especially proud of, and I think it's a big way to grow for me as a writer, and as a food writer, and as a food writer for kids. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this book.
Mm. As Rana comments in the chat, it's a fascinating concept for a children's book, and I agree. And what you were talking about the Waldorf schools and about education in general. And I think
Yeah,
so much of the way that we look at education in India is
yeah,
too much of the rote and too little of life skills. A lot of it is, I went to a boys' school. Okay, that was a long time ago. I don't know what, little boys are taught now. But there was
mm,
no concept of learning how to cook or any form of, understand. I mean, it, I'm male, I come from male, in the male privilege thing of not even being expected to do it unless I wanted to. My mother
yeah,
showed me a few things which I picked up, but besides that, I had no real interest in it.
mm,
I never had to. I mean, till
mm,
I never had to learn how to cook till this pandemic and lockdown,
yeah,
and from which came the group, and from which came,
yeah,
if not love for cooking, I'm not comfortable with it. I
mm,
can feed myself reasonably healthily. Uh,
mm,
I haven't reached that stage of cooking, which to me is a benchmark, which is, uh, can I save a dish that's going wrong? I haven't a clue. I'll eat it
Mm.
because I have low standards. But you know,
Yeah.
the thing of being able to, like, you absentmindedly put too much salt in, and I wouldn't know what to do,
You put
right?
potatoes.
Which I've discovered thanks to people like you generously sharing stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Which I haven't had. I mean, that's one that, yes,
Yeah.
now I know you put potatoes in. It deals with saltiness. It deals with too much mirchi as well,
Yes.
and things like that. But beyond that, I haven't
Yeah.
imbibed this,
Yes.
right?
I know what you
And that's an issue, I think, with the way that we look at education, looking at life skills, really.
Yes.
And what you put so nicely about the way these schools look at it, it's head, but it's also heart, it's also hands.
Yeah.
I mean, even on those kind of things. In school, I did not learn how to change a fuse,
Yeah.
for instance. I mean, it's a boy thing to do.
Yeah.
Uh, I did learn from an uncle of mine how to
Mm.
unscrew a plug and shave the wire and put it in, but that would be nice to learn in school as well, you know, and
Absolutely.
all sorts of things. Cooking, as we've commented, is such a gendered thing here. That,
Absolutely.
you know, the thing is, there's one of these things that I remember saying this on Twitter, and it caught on kind of thing. Give a man a chapati and he'll eat for today. Teach a
Yeah.
man to make a chapati and he'll never shut the fuck up about it.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I we did remember. I remember, folks, that if you would like to come on and ask your questions in video, I'd be happy to have you in because we have a small group. But let me ask Pragya's question anyway.
Yeah.
Uh, Ranj, have you thought about ways in which some classic Indian cuisine items can be re-envisioned as vegan, low sodium, no oil versions?
I'm constantly thinking about this. I'm constantly um, making over, traditional Indian recipes into vegan friendly, low sodium, low sugar, versions. One, because it's also been a personal journey for me in understanding, I mean, getting to this place where I'm very conscious of what I eat. And my daughter obviously is far more keenly attuned to the workings of uh, farming, and from everything from climate change to farming to food miles to animal cruelty in the food markets. And uh, so I think it's becoming it's becoming a beautiful way to re-examine what we've been handed down for so many years. And Pragya knows this, and I've shared recipes with her which have been made over to suit a vegan choice. Um, but yeah, I think low sodium, when it comes to low sodium, I think Pragya knows this all too well, that it's just a matter of understanding, for example, that if you're using greens in a dish, then you go low on the salt, because greens tend to be high, they have high sodium content. And just these little things to keep in mind, I think. And also how your palate evolves over the years. I mean, as you grow older, you have um, I mean, I can't eat a tub of ice cream that like I used to before. And right, and I can't bite into sugar cane the way I used to when I was a kid. Or I can't stand the same level of heat in street food that I used to so blindly just go with when I was younger. So I think all of these things come into play. And I think once you get a hang of all these things, you naturally become uh, inclined to manipulating recipes to suit your palate, to suit your health conditions, to suit your. Yeah, but that would be actually a great idea for a book, if we can, transform some old traditional recipes into to suit the new age eater.
Pragya remarks in the Q&A. The
Go on.
hardest thing to do is water saute when one is used to tadka.
Yeah.
Yes. I know from Pragya's social media posts and Facebook that she has been trying to do the vegan lifestyle. And I remember this when I had in my years in Forbes, we had a young American woman who joined us
Mm,
who was vegan.
mm,
And she said, I actually thought it would be easier to be vegan in India, but no, it was harder. Uh, the simple concepts of things like what you consider that, yes, vegetarian friendly, but
yeah.
what people consider vegetarian and the reasons I am
Yeah.
vegan are nothing to do with tradition or
Yes.
of religion or whatever.
Yes.
It's what I think about the planet and sustainability and the exploitation of animals. And it's actually been harder to be vegan in India. Of course, that has changed now. But what's your experience? I mean, what would do you classify? Would you call yourself vegan?
No, I am a vegetarian. I don't call myself a vegan, and it's precisely for the reasons that you just mentioned. That it's really hard, at least for me, to do away with ghee and yogurt and curd. So these are the two things that I'm finding really hard to come out of. But at some point, because my daughter's heavily inclined towards veganism, and but she sometimes tells me that I think I can be a vegan for the most part, but I can't give up cheese, mama. So it's uh, it's a battle, but yeah, it's really hard because, like Pragya said, for tadka the first thing you do is put ghee in a pan and or oil. I mean, for her it's harder because she is on a no oil diet as well. um, yeah, so it's hard to be a vegan in India, I think, because we tend to put butter and ghee in everything. Curd is an integral part of and our coffees and teas are, they come with milk, inbuilt with milk. I remember the biggest culture shock to me was when I went to New Zealand, and the first day at the university there was a coffee break and everyone was gathering around this coffee machine. And I came from my Dashini coffee mindset, so I went there and they handed me a cup of a black coffee. So I didn't know that creamer and sugar had to be asked for separately. So I think for us, we put milk, and concept of nut milks and everything is still sort of, I mean, we're still not there yet. Unless you, of course, go to a Starbucks, you can always get your vegan friendly coffee. But if you're at home, nut milks are also expensive. See, good eating is expensive, and good eating is work as well. So I think, the vegan lifestyle. I mean, I know there's lots of people who are vegans all around me. I see a lot of people, but I think procuring nut milks and these kinds of things are still not as easy as it is in the West.
Hmm. But I mean, even in the West, I mean, anything that is not mainstream and
Hmm.
therefore cannot be mass produced or produced by a factory system,
Hmm.
which is often exploited,
Hmm.
or which is not part of a large chain of manufacture,
Hmm.
is becomes more expensive because it is more expensive to produce. So until more and more people get into these life choices,
Hmm.
uh, and it becomes viable for makers and marketers to be able to produce this stuff, then it's still going to be more expensive and it's still going to be a choice that people with some privilege can have and not
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
if you're a poor kid in a school who's getting a free meal, that egg makes a difference to your protein intake,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Uh, if you have quality protein coming to you in your home, you can say no to an egg, right?
Yeah.
There was a fun little story from way back, I think early 2000s or whatever it is. A friend's parents, it was a friend was flying parents to the US and British Airways, I think it was, and had specified vegetarian meal.
Hmm.
And they ate their meal, and the old gentleman was very upset. And the attendants were like, but you asked for vegetarian food. It was specified that it had to be vegetarian because of your religious beliefs. So
Yeah.
we made sure that you have the vegetarian food. He said, but where's my curd?
Yeah.
Because there's a South Indian gentleman who needed his curd at the end
Yeah.
of the meal. It wasn't thing. Yeah, but yeah, these choices are hard ones to make. I mean, I know that I have been off and on trying to become vegetarian, and I succeed 5 days out of the week usually, and it just doesn't work for me beyond that. Preferences of taste, of I don't know what, I think the things I've grown up with, what I consider my comfort foods per se, perhaps. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, we talked
Mm.
about comfort foods. One of my comfort foods, because of where my grandma grew up, is kaswe, which is a
Mm.
very difficult comfort food to get comforted by in India. It's very expensive food to make up.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I am imprinted with kaswe because that's what my grandma made.
Yeah.
Uh,
I know what you mean.
Pragya asks, I have heard of something called the ahimsa diet
That.
now. And if dairy can be had without the factory raping of cows to keep them pregnant and producing milk, then dairy would become okay again too in such a diet. A
That would be the
comment more than a question.
Yeah, that would be the day. And I think this, uh, I don't know, if people are aware that it's referred to as ahimsa diet, but it's a constant conversation that happens in the local farming circles, in the dairy farming circles. And one of our friends, he has a dairy farm, and they have, I think, 30, uh, not more than 30 cows. So they're not mass producing the milk, and they're all desi cows. So there's a lot of conversation around this as well. And what they feed the cows is also important. So they have a farm where they feed the cows what they grow on the farm, and they don't. It's not mass produced, and so these are, I think, some really great things are happening in dairy farming in India. And yeah, and I also get my doodh from a local farm, and it's delivered to me within the hour of being milked, the cow being milked. And they don't have more than, I think, 10 or 11 cows on the farm. And so there's not too much milk. So I can't order milk every day. Like, I don't get milk every day. But I only use 2 teaspoons of milk every day in my chai. So, and we've all, the whole entire family has steered clear of drinking milk or consuming milk in its in milk form. So we don't do uh, muesli with milk, or cornflakes. So that's gone. And husband doesn't drink tea or coffee, so there's no question of him consuming milk at all. But he loves to have dahi, and he loves ghee. And daughter, of course, she's been a no milk person for I don't know how many years now. She doesn't drink milk, but she loves ghee and butter and cheese. So these are things that we have. And cheese, unfortunately, we're still stuck with processed cheese, because one, getting good cheese, which is see, again, all of these things you think about in terms of shelf life. And you buy a slab of processed cheese, it's going to last you for so many days in the refrigerator. But do you want to do that? Do you want to? So if I want to buy homemade cheese, which is made with organic, whatever natural ingredients, without additives, then I have to pay through my teeth for it, and I can't always afford to. So it's a so we try and do Indian cheeses. We fancify our Indian paneer, and you know we do we put paneer, freshly made paneer, when it's not hardened, when it's still soft like cottage cheese, right? We use that in pastas and things like that. So we try. I mean, we try and uh, because we know that the paneer is homemade, and we know how we're making it. We're not adding any additives or preservatives, and we make the paneer, and we eat it as soon as we make it. So yeah, there's a lot of things, I think, that one needs to be uh, aware of on an everyday basis, and sometimes it's very exhausting. But it's it's fun because I would rather only be doing this for a living if I could. So, but I do have a day job which pays my bills.
Hmm.
So fortunate, and I'm grateful that I have this opportunity to write these books and not expect to be monetarily, handsomely rewarded for them, because it's not a lucrative uh, career prospect. Writing books, and especially books for children, there's no money in it. My royalty statement is in the negative, so it means that I owe them money. Yeah.
Uh, you were talking about the Ahimsa diet, and I remembered. Did you read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
Yeah.
Douglas
What?
Adams, the restaurant at the end of the universe, the cow that has been bred to want to give you itself for a meal, like I recommend a cut from here kind of thing. But obviously fiction. And but we are seeing very interesting stuff happening right now on two fronts, which is plant-based meat substitutes and lab-grown meat, which I've been following actually for the last couple of years as someone who's trying to sort of give up meat and hasn't succeeded because I just don't have the damn willpower. But Beyond Meat and the Impossible Burgers and things like that. And a lot of those, I think, are appealing to also people like me who want the taste and feel of meat, rather than people who are vegetarian anyway and who don't particularly want that. I mean, they know how to get the nutrition in other
Yeah.
ways and
Yeah.
don't particularly crave the taste and mouth feel of meat per se.
Hmm.
But there are interesting things happening there for, of course, they're still hideously expensive.
Yeah.
Plant-based burger is going to set you back, the price of a gourmet meat-based burger or more.
Hmm.
And but there are lots of interesting stuff happening there. But I'm again looking at the time and being a little mindful of that. And I want to make sure that the folks who have stayed with us for 2 hours now, if there's anyone who does have any questions, please do bung them in. Uh, and I'd like to end with another reading, from there. But before that, the you talked about your royalty statements being in the negative, and that is a fact when it comes to so much writing that one does. The ability to write for a living.
Yeah.
Uh, there are very few avenues open for that. Very few people make enough money from, say, one of your choices would be to be able to sit and write books far more. But there's a small percentage of people who make enough money just by writing books. Everybody has a day job. Uh,
Yeah.
what's your writing day like? How much time are you able to give to your writing, as opposed to the job that pays the bills and the other parts of your life?
It's been a struggle with discipline because I'm not the most disciplined person when it comes to writing, sitting down and writing every single day. That doesn't often happen. I'll be honest. But the way I've come to look at it now is that you don't have to. It shouldn't be a rule, and it shouldn't. Uh, you know, the writing will happen when it has to, but writing again is not something that you pursue in isolation. Writing also comes from reading well, and writing also comes from I mean, just people watching, observing, having conversations with people, and understanding mindsets, and I get a lot of all this fulfilled because I'm a teacher. I teach at a college, and I'm constantly surrounded by young minds, curious minds, and what I teach also is very closely related to writing. So I teach cross-cultural communications and digital media communications and things like that. So it's there. It's constantly being fueled. But writing books, so far the process has been that there's usually a deadline, and that's a great motivator, like nothing else, you know because the editor's hammers over your head all the time, and uh, you know you have to turn this manuscript in within the next 48 days or 60 days or whatever. So you know better than not to get the job done. So you sit and you write every day, and and if you're someone like me who is so perspicacy about every sentence that goes up on the page, that you backspace and then you tweak it. But I've learned now slowly the hard way that you put words down, and then you don't edit while you write. So so it's not been easy. I wouldn't say it's been, it's just come to me like that. Or but I think I work really well with deadlines. So that's good. And also, I've realized that it's not enough to be a writer, because you're writing to what end? To a readership, to attain a good readership. I think that's your primary goal, that you want a readership. If you're going to write and you want to be published, I mean. So then some of that, the way that's been shaped, I think the way social media has driven this whole thing is that you have to be visible, and you have to let go of certain inhibitions, and you have to be out there. You have to constantly be out there, and for people to know you, to know your work, and to write more. I think I've just learned that I have to write more. So whether it's a book, or whether it's my freelance writing, and I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to make choices and write sporadically. Also, I don't really have to do my freelance writing every single day in order to pay the bills. I'm fortunate that I have a day job. But I think just writing earlier, the way I used to play this game was that I used to write, when I'm writing on a book, I just cut off from everything else. And suddenly you have a book after 2 years. It's a laborious process. You write the book in 3 months, but it takes 6 months, 9 months sometimes to edit, and to go through the editorial process with your editors. And then of course the layout and the graphics and the photography and everything to come in place. And so it's a laborious process, and for 2 years you've been cut off from the world, and the world doesn't know who you are. So suddenly you have this book, and why must they invest in this book that you've written? Where were you for the past 2 years? So I realized that writing more and being more visible is an efficient way to be a writer in today's day and age, and to have a readership. So I've upped my social media game also in the past year. And all of this also had to do with my being a socially awkward person. So I can't constantly take selfies, and I can't always say that I did this, or I'm so great, and I can't do that. But I see that a lot of books get sold by people who sell themselves in that way. So I'm not going and shouting from the rooftops that I'm the greatest of all, but I am slowly learning to showcase my skills in the kitchen, my, whatever, the musicality of my cooking, the voice in my writing. So I'm writing more. So I want to be more visible as a writer. And yeah, so that's how I think one comes to this place where, you write often, you write a book when you want to, when you have to. But even otherwise, just writing a social media post is also good enough to fuel your creative energy, and to keep at it. Don't get into a bout of inertia, and don't suddenly emerge out of the woodworks and say, hey, I've written this book. And people will be like, okay, whatever, who are you? So I've learned that I need to be constantly visible. And actually my job has helped quite a bit with this visibility factor. So yeah,
Mm.
it's all come together in some strange way.
Mm. Yeah, the reality of living in the world of influencers. Uh,
Exactly.
and that kind of thing does play a part in this. And as many writers over uh, the years have realized that the writing is the solitary phase, and you have to be able to do that, and you have to be able to switch to the marketing phase. Not everyone takes that decision. There are writers who do not do this, but it is a factor that you do have to go out there and present, market, sell as a professor, a teacher of marketing and things like that, and as a copywriter, you do know that that is part of that process. Uh, I mean, I know writers who will not be visible on social media for a while. That means they're working on a book. Then they're in promotion mode at a time when the book is doing the rounds and things like that. And you have to learn to balance that. But yeah, I'm also looking at the time. It's 11 o'clock. It's a working day tomorrow for you. You know, been generous enough to do a late night chat uh, till 11 o'clock in the night, because I'm weird and I'm like that and I like to have my conversation with this, but I will remember that you do need to get some sleep. Can you give us another reading to wind up with?
Okay, sure. Um, like I was telling you earlier, reading from History Dishtory is not easy because it's fiction for children, and it's a story that sort of has a beginning and an end, and suddenly to read a paragraph from here. But I'll give you a little bit of a background to the story. It's a pair of twins, a girl and a boy, who are about 9 years old when the book starts. And so it's Sia and Summer, and Sia is a trivia junkie, and her twin brother Summer, is a budding chef. So there's a role reversal there, which was deliberate. And so in this chapter, they're in Italy, virtually in the virtual reality world through the gaming app, and they're in the Renaissance. So they are. Here's a short excerpt from this chapter. Um, there were at least 1,000 dishes and drinks, and they moved along with the help of the buttons provided on the 7D display, and the translator seemed to effortlessly keep pace with their speed. Pizza and pine nuts, roasted pheasants dipped in gold, savory pies of whole goats' heads, fried bird tongues, and rabbit ears boiled in brine. They gazed awestruck at the beautiful castles made entirely of vanilla scented pastry, pillow soft pieces of fine white bread, and extravagant desserts like the torta bianca, which is a royal white cake. There was a row of Neapolitan mostaccioli, which were soft, cakey, chewy pastry, and rock solid round cookies, which were actually called small cakes back in the day. Summer was making mental notes of all the dishes, their presentation styles, the platters with wobbly chalks and pies. He especially loved long necked decanters with rose and wine colored drinks, and the silver gravy troughs suspended over a bed of glowing coals. He snuck his finger into the glass jars filled with Parmesan and Proventura cheeses and marveled. Look, Sia, cheese, exotic cheese. Ha, more like ancient cheese, Sia giggled. Sam clicked a disapproving tongue at her irreverence and proceeded to try his luck at tasting sauces made with poppy seed and elderflower, anise and saffron scented milks. While Sia was drooling over the dessert trays, Summer wandered off to the herbs section at the corner, picking out sprigs of marjoram and borage, fiddling with the artistically arranged piles of myrtle and mugwort. So, this is a short excerpt from my new book, History Dishtory, um, where the kids are figuring their way around a Renaissance era banquet at one of the papal kitchens in Italy, in Rome.
Right. So later on, I'll ask you to, I mean, I will share your book links with everyone who signed in as well. I did send it out earlier in advance as well. And thank you. Thank you very much for making the time on a Sunday to have this nice, long, leisurely chat. And everyone who joined us and who stayed through, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And I hope that you will come back for other conversations. And thank you, Ranj.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you so much for patiently listening to my long ramblings about kitchen stories and kitchen disasters, and how I found myself as a writer, and my crazy Chicago stories, which you've actually also lived through for 15 years with me. So, as old as my daughter, actually, my daughter's 16, and yeah, that's how long we've known each other. That's my yardstick for remembering how long I've known you guys. So it was so wonderful to be here, and I think it just came so naturally to me to open up about these things, because these are things that my life is hinged on, and these are things that I'm so ardently passionate about. And also, thanks to everyone who stayed up. My student is still here, which is so wonderful. Big hugs to you, Shritama, and you have class tomorrow, so I think you should sign off and get ready for tomorrow. And Pragya had some really cool things to say. I'm going to take a screenshot and read it later.
I'll send you the chat.
Yeah, please do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, thanks, Ram. It was nice to see you here, and I hope it was interesting for you. Uh, thank you, everyone, and good night. And thank you again, Ranj.
Thanks, Pete.
Bye
Lots
bye.
of love to you. Take care of yourself, and I will see you here, there, somewhere.
Come back for other table talks as well. It'd be lovely.
I certainly will. I will.
All right.
I will. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Bye. Bye, Prags. Bye, Ramnath.